Calculated mind game right now.
Put that even a little bit better than if he had gotten that same victory over Alcaraz. I think this is a tougher matchup for him in the last few years.
That's a great point, because if Sinner is Djokovic 2.0, Novak just went to 3.0.
That was remarkable.
We'll see what he needs against Alcaraz in the final to get his 11th title here. 25.
The strange thing about tennis right now is that everyone keeps insisting a rivalry exists, even when reality keeps quietly disagreeing with the script. Somewhere along the way, the sport decided that Jannik Sinner and Carlos Alcaraz were supposed to be the next defining clash, the modern version of a golden era we are clearly not ready to let go of.
I think we have bad data here, because if he had won one more point last year, it would be like, well, of course he's going to win. I mean, we'd be talking about it in terms of like, well, Sinner's unbeatable on clay, clearly, right? Like, 'cause he was 1 point away from winning in straight sets, Roland Garros. And now he's not lost a match on clay this season either. So we'd be like, well, he's never going to lose on clay. So
the marketing machine has already printed the posters, written the headlines, and crowned the narrative. But there is just one small problem hiding in plain sight. Not everyone is convinced, and one voice in particular sounds less like admiration and more like quiet disbelief.
First serious coach that was working with him in those crucial years was my coach as well, Riccardo Piatti. And I used to train quite a bit at Piatti's academy in Italy, and I was practicing with Sinner a lot of the times when he was a junior. And I liked him actually a lot, because he's always skinny as I was, and tall, and grew up skiing, grew up on the mountains, so very similar story to mine. And he always...
Because when Novak Djokovic speaks, he does not just talk about tennis. He dissects it with the precision of someone who has seen every version of greatness up close. And when he starts raising eyebrows about a player being labeled a champion, people listen, even if they pretend not to.
Chasing Jannik and Carlos.
So I'm always the chaser, and I'm never being chased. I find it a little bit disrespectful that you kind of miss out on what happened in between. There's probably about a 15-year period in between where I was dominating the Grand Slams.
What makes this situation fascinating is not that Djokovic outright dismisses Sinner because he rarely deals in blunt insults, but that his tone carries something far more unsettling. It carries doubt, and in tennis, doubt spreads faster than hype. At first glance, Sinner's rise looks perfectly packaged for a new era. He is calm, composed, technically sound, and incredibly consistent from the baseline, which makes him an easy figure to market. However, when you look a little closer, the story begins to wobble. Djokovic's skepticism does not come from nowhere, and it certainly is not random. It stems from patterns, and Djokovic has built an entire career on recognizing patterns before anyone else does. He has faced legends at their peak, dismantled rising stars before they fully formed, and adapted his game so many times that he practically sees through players rather than just playing against them.
Right now, it's a ripe time for us to really address the system, because the system and the structure obviously doesn't work of anti-doping. It's not a good image for our sport, that's for sure. The majority of the players that I've talked to in the locker room, not just in the last few days, but also last few months, that are not happy with the way this whole process has been handled.
So when he looks at Sinner, he is not just seeing results on paper, he is evaluating the foundation beneath those results. And that is where things become uncomfortable, because the foundation does not look as solid as the headlines would have you believe. There is also an awkward truth that keeps getting brushed aside, almost as if the sport collectively agreed to look the other way. Sinner's backstory is not as clean as the polished image suggests, yet those complications rarely make it into mainstream conversations. Whenever something questionable surfaces, it gets softened, reframed, or quietly buried under the next wave of highlight reels and praise. It creates this strange disconnect where fans are told to celebrate without asking too many questions. And that is exactly the kind of environment where skepticism begins to grow. Djokovic, whether intentionally or not, taps into that skepticism by refusing to fully buy into the narrative. Alcaraz brings unpredictability, creativity, and a kind of fearless energy that feels authentic rather than manufactured. His highs are explosive and his lows are visible, which ironically makes his journey feel more real. There is no illusion of perfection, and that rawness makes his success easier to trust.
He's an inspiration for all of us, and especially the young players. You know, the level he is still playing, he is, I think, the most professional athlete, you know, we have here in the locker room, and you see him on the court, you know, he knows how to handle every situation the best possible way. And me as a 24-year-old, I'm lucky to have someone like him, you know, in front of my eyes, and I can hopefully learn something, you know, and I feel like every day, you know, every time he plays, I can learn something about him.
Sinner, on the other hand, feels like a product that has been carefully assembled rather than organically grown. His game is efficient, almost clinical, but sometimes efficiency can mask limitations. Djokovic seems to suggest, without explicitly saying it, that there is a ceiling to that kind of precision when it is not backed by adaptability under extreme pressure. And pressure, in tennis, is the ultimate truth teller. Those are the moments that define champions, and more importantly, those are the moments that separate champions from legends. Djokovic knows this better than anyone because he has lived in those moments for over a decade. He has faced players who looked unstoppable until they weren't, players who dominated headlines but disappeared when the pressure peaked. So when he evaluates Sinner, he is not just asking whether he can win matches, he is asking whether he can survive the kind of battles that define greatness. And that is where the hesitation creeps in. There is also a subtle psychological layer to this entire situation that makes it even more intriguing.
So instead of playing the ATP finals, Novak Djokovic was busy with talking about Piers Morgan about Jannik Sinner's doping case. And Novak Djokovic also said that Jannik Sinner is responsible for his doping case. You can watch the whole video on YouTube, but I just want to talk about the part about Jannik Sinner, so let's get into it. Oh shit, my bad. This is it. So Novak Djokovic said about Jannik Sinner's doping case, I think he didn't do it on purpose, but of course he is responsible. Novak goes on and he says, when this happened, I was shocked. Honestly, I do think that he didn't do it on purpose, but the way the whole case was handled is so many red flags. And
by questioning Sinner's legitimacy, Djokovic is not just analyzing him, he is applying pressure in a way that goes beyond the court. He is forcing Sinner into a position where he has to prove something, not just to fans, but to one of the greatest competitors the sport has ever seen. That kind of pressure can either elevate a player or expose them. At the same time, the sport's insistence on pushing the Sinner versus Alcaraz rivalry adds another layer of complexity. Rivalries are not built through marketing campaigns. They are forged through repeated clashes, emotional battles, and moments that capture the imagination of fans. You cannot manufacture that kind of intensity overnight, no matter how much you want to. Yet, the narrative keeps being pushed, almost as if the sport is trying to convince itself as much as it is trying to convince the audience. The irony is that by forcing this rivalry, the sport might actually be highlighting the very gaps it is trying to hide. Every time Sinner is placed alongside Alcaraz as an equal, the differences become more noticeable. Every comparison invites scrutiny, and every moment of inconsistency becomes harder to ignore.
It appears that you can almost affect the outcome if you're a top player, if you have access to the top lawyers. The inconsistency is something that frustrates all the players. It's like if you are going to treat every case individually or independently, which is what's happening, then there is no consistency, then there is no transparency, and you know, some cases are transparent, some...
Djokovic's perspective cuts through all of that noise with a level of clarity that only experience can provide. He is not interested in narratives or marketing angles. He is interested in what actually happens on the court when everything is at stake. And from his point of view, there are still too many unanswered questions surrounding Sinner. The most uncomfortable question of all is whether Sinner's current success is sustainable or whether it is being amplified by a system that is eager to find its next star. Tennis has always had a tendency to anoint players prematurely, only to quietly move on. It is how difficult it is to stay at the top once the spotlight intensifies. Winning a few big matches is one thing. Carrying the weight of expectation year after year is something entirely different. It requires a level of mental toughness that cannot be faked or manufactured. So when he questions whether Sinner can ever be truly great, he is not just being dismissive. He is setting a standard, one that very few players in history have been able to meet.
Here's everything you need to know about Jannik Sinner's current spurt of dominance, because it is fucking ridiculous. First one, and the obvious, he is the first player in history of the sport to win 5 straight Masters 1000 titles. And to make it even more ridiculous, he has dropped 2 sets across those 5 tournaments. Two fucking sets. Next, since Jannik won his first Grand Slam title at the 2024 Australian Open, he has only lost to one person multiple times. That person is obviously Carlos Alcaraz.
The real twist in this entire story is that Sinner still has time to prove everyone wrong. Doubt, after all, can be a powerful motivator if it is handled correctly. But the longer these questions remain unanswered, the louder they will become, and the harder it will be to ignore them. Meanwhile, the sport continues to push its narrative, hoping that repetition will eventually turn perception into reality. It is a strategy that has worked before, but it is far from guaranteed. Fans are more observant than they are often given credit for, and they can sense when something feels forced. Which brings everything back to the central tension that makes this story so compelling. Is Sinner truly the future of tennis? Or is he a carefully constructed illusion that has yet to face its ultimate test? The matches between Jannik Sinner and Carlos Alcaraz have had moments of brilliance, no doubt, but they have not yet built the kind of emotional gravity that defines truly historic rivalries. There is no lingering sense of unfinished business, no repeated heartbreaks or dramatic reversals that leave fans arguing for years. Instead, what exists right now feels more like potential being marketed as certainty.
For those who think that Djokovic beating Sinner in the semifinal of the Australian Open means that the big three is playing better tennis than Alcaraz and Sinner, this is a very short view. Let me explain. First of all, you take one match and you make a rule out of it. Just remember that Sinner had won the 5 previous matches they played against each other. Just one match will not make me change my mind about what I've seen for the last 2-3 years. Jannik moves faster, hits harder, takes the ball earlier, and serves better than Novak. But Novak is the strongest mental in tennis in the...
And that distinction matters more than people realize. Because in tennis, timing is everything, and right now the timing feels rushed. The sport seems eager to move on from the era of Novak Djokovic, Rafael Nadal, and Roger Federer, as if closing that chapter quickly will somehow make the next one feel just as meaningful. However, greatness does not work like a relay race where one champion simply hands the baton to the next. It is far messier than that, filled with false starts, unexpected challengers, and players who rise too quickly only to struggle when the weight becomes too heavy. This is where Djokovic's underlying message becomes even sharper, usually praised as a strength, starts to look more like rigidity. When momentum shifts, he can sometimes appear stuck in a single gear, unable to improvise in the way that the very best players do instinctively. It is a subtle weakness, but at the highest level, subtle weaknesses are often the difference between dominance and disappointment. And then there is the mental side of the game, which rarely gets the spotlight it deserves until it becomes impossible to ignore. Djokovic built his legacy not just on skill, but on an almost unsettling ability to thrive in hostile environments, to turn pressure into fuel rather than fear. That is the standard he measures others against, and it is a standard that Sinner has not consistently met yet.
He thinks that there is a big gap between Sinner and everybody else. I think we can all agree with that. But he also says that he thinks there is a gap between Alcaraz, myself, and maybe Novak and everyone else. So
it's borderline delusional when you look at it, because he hasn't been necessarily challenging Sinner in the way that Alcaraz has. I mean, Alcaraz holds 3 of the Grand Slams.
What makes this even more complicated is the way Sinner's past continues to linger in the background without ever being fully addressed. The irony is that the more the system tries to smooth over these inconsistencies, the more noticeable they become. Fans are not just watching matches anymore. They are analyzing everything, from body language to backstories, looking for signs that confirm or challenge what they are being told. In that environment, transparency matters, and any lack of it becomes a story in itself. Djokovic, whether intentionally or not, amplifies that story by refusing to play along. If Sinner is truly destined for greatness, then none of this